Hello and welcome to the second episode of Bleeding Cool's newest video feature, The Bleed. It's a weekly book club with myself, David Desaniaki. I think I butchered that again, David, I'm sorry. And Eric Grove. And this is Eric's last week with us. Unfortunately, he's going to join us as a guest in the future, but this is his last time as a regular contributor. And we're going to miss you, Eric.
Yeah, if you're only on 2 episodes, I know you had a 0 episode also, but are you isn't he already a guest contributor?
Yeah, I've already been a guest. I've been a guest.
Yeah.
He's our most consistent guest.
Exactly. That's how we'll frame it.
He's the go-to, right? Yeah.
And then joining us this week is Brandon Montclare, the writer of Rocket Girl, and has edited a lot of awesome comics over the days. I'm not saying Rocket Girl's not on, I'm just saying you've also edited some really great comics in your career.
Yep.
And then also joining us is Anwar Newton. You might know him as the guy that went viral for doing mushrooms at San Diego Comic-Con, texting his girlfriend, putting it on Reddit. And, yeah, his microphone, unfortunately, is not working. So for the podcast portion, you guys are kind of shit out of luck. But for the video, you guys will see. Yeah, see, he's going to stop paying for porn like a lunatic and buy a microphone. Yeah. Sorry, guys, frown face. So they're joining us this week, and this week, like I said, it's our second episode, and for some reason we've had more technical difficulties this episode than we had in the 2 test runs and our actual season premiere, but that's okay, because we're here now, and we're getting started. If you're watching, you can chime in with the hashtag TheBleedBC, or if you're listening, you can still chime in with your thoughts, and we will always respond. But otherwise, we're going to jump right into it. This week we're discussing East of West by Nick Dragotta and Jonathan Hickman. Not Nick Batara, that's the other Nick that does a book with Hickman. And yeah, this was a fun book. And before we get into it, though, we're going to do this thing where we kind of go through the week and talk about what enjoyed us, whether it was what we enjoyed, whether it's a piece of news or a new comic that we read. Maybe it's not new, but it's something that we managed to get our hands on. So I'm just going to go down the list real quick. Eric, what interested you this week?
Well, I was really excited to hear that DC is going to do some promotional work with Gotham Central leading up to the release of the TV show Gotham. I'm not 100% convinced I'm going to love the Gotham TV show, but I love Gotham Central. It's one of my favorite comics from DC from that era. So anything to get a little bit more attention to that, I think is exciting. And really just the first issue of that book and then the collected trades they're really good reading. So it's good to see that that's going to get some notoriety. So that was something I was both excited about and I'm looking forward to rereading. So that was my bit.
Cool. And Eric, what about you?
You just asked Eric.
Eric, David, what about you?
David, really? I haven't actually been reading too much. This is just sort of a happenstance, but I've actually been reading Rocket Girl, as a matter of fact, Brandon, because I'm doing that interview with you for the.
All right. Is it any good?
Yeah,
I heard it's pretty good.
It's okay. It's all right, I guess. No, it's damn good stuff, man. I love it. I read the first 2 issues back when it was coming out in issues, but then I made the move from the East Coast to the West Coast, and like my pull list got disrupted, and I couldn't find the issues that I missed. But I got the trade, was reading that, and I love it. I'm looking forward to talking to you more about it later.
Oh, cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Good book. I'm really glad I got in on that Kickstarter, mostly because it was Kickstarters, you never know how they're going to come through. It's a show of faith, and it was
sure.
But Brandon and Amy Reeder, the artist, they've kind of have a proven track record with doing their Kickstarters on time, getting the book out, fulfilling all their rewards. So it kind of seemed like a no-brainer for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're 2 for 2, but I guess in Kickstarter terms, 2 is a lot, right? Because it hasn't been around that long. But this is the first summer we did 2 summers in a row, and then not this year, and I kind of miss it. It's a lot of work and it's big. It's very draining. But again, it's kind of like missing Christmas in a way. It's like, what happened? I was supposed to be like surrounded by boxes for 3 weeks this summer and packing stuff with interns. But no,
it must feel great too. When you get a project like that and fully funded. It's just a show of like how how many people like what you're doing, you know?
Oh yeah. Like I said, and I don't want to mess with the the introductions here, but no, it's a lot of fun. Kickstarter is great for a million reasons. It's great to raise money to help with the book, but it's also a great promotional tool in and of itself, which I think you can imagine. And one of the other great things is, especially for someone like Amy, who's done so much work and is known for the Marvel and DC stuff. It's like it's a validation when you do something different. And if you're working for a new image book or something creator-owned, you got to do the book. It's got to come out. Then you got to see the reaction. And it takes so long, and you don't know if people actually want it or like it. But with Kickstarter, as soon as you're putting it out there and people are putting their money down, it means that they like your stuff or the project looks good, and it's a big validation. And to dovetail that into something I'm excited about, I'll mention there's a sherbet lock, which is a takeoff on Sherlock Holmes, Kickstarter out there now by a guy named Michael Vincent Bramley, so people should check that out. It looks like it launched last week. This week it's about 3/4 towards its goal, so it looks like it's going to make it, but it's worth everyone checking out.
Cool. What is it? One more time? Sorry, sure.
It's sherbet lock, like the ice cream, which I always called sherbet until I started looking at this book, and they said, well, hey, that's spelled wrong. It's like it's not sherbet. You're an idiot. And I said, oh, really? It's like, I don't know.
My whole life I've been thinking.
Exactly. And he's English, so I'm like, well, maybe it's different. Maybe he's not quite. Maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about. But so it's a kind of I don't know if it's set in a specific time, but it's a not too distant future type of deal where it's a female Sherlock Holmes character called Sherbet Locke, and like I said, you can find it pretty easy on Kickstarter. It's got an $8,000 goal, and I think it was at $6,000 after a little less than a week. So, and
great, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So
is that what you've been looking at recently?
Yeah, I guess so. That's what I will submit. So.
Okay.
Cool.
There was another Kickstarter I just donated to the Watson and Holmes Volume 2 project.
Right.
Just because I saw like halfway through funding it didn't look like they were going to get it, and I would really like to see a second volume of that, so I ended up biting the bucket. And they reached their funding, so I'm not as into Sherlock Holmes, the character in the old Sir Arthur Conan Doyle novels, but who doesn't like detective stories? So I'm going to have to check that project out.
Yeah, and there's a weird psychology in Kickstarter sometimes where I'm the same way, where it's like, oh, that might not make it, so let me give some money. But doing two, it's really the majority of people who back it want to back a winner. So it's like, oh, that's going to make it. I want it also. I'll add on my $10. So to me, it's like the reverse. It's like the reverse. To me, if I know somebody and I don't really think it's going to be a great book and I don't know them that well, it's like, oh, I feel like I have to give something. Oh, wait, they made it. It's okay. I don't have to give anything. But it's like the opposite. People are like, that's usually not the mentality. People want to back a winner. So,
Anwar says it's streamlined capitalism, that people pay directly for the product. Anwar, what are you working on? What are you? That's a good picture. That's a very whiny Bruce Wayne. For those of you listening, he just sketched a really very whiny baby Bruce Wayne, and he's very interested.
It's not like his parents just died or anything.
Look at those ears.
Yeah.
And the rose. Oh, it's good. It's good, Anwar.
You're an insensitive bastard, Joe.
Oh. And Human Centipede. Oh. Is that the Human Centipede?
That might be a more exciting comic. The Human Centipede.
Ant-Man. I guess that makes.
That's a great idea. The Human Centipede comic.
That looked like. All right. Okay.
I think Anwar is the best guest so far. I think the drawing.
Working with what God gave him, and that's.
A notepad? Yeah.
Human Centipede Man in prison, he writes. Wow. I'm
Oh, man.
All right.
Okay. So we're going to get started on East of West. This was a pick from our dearly departed Ian Maggetto. This is his first pick. And I was really excited when he picked this, just because I just recently picked up this pretty hardcover.
I was going to say, it looks different than mine. That looks pretty sweet. Is that the...
Yeah. This is they were. I don't know. It was a con exclusive. It
Yeah,
says
I think
exclusive.
so, right? Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
which one, but they had it at the CBLDF booth.
Mhm.
Cool.
So
Might
I
have been
got
your
that,
yeah.
and so it has Nick's signature in there.
Oh yeah, I was with you when you bought that.
Yeah, it was a cool booth. They had a lot of cool exclusives from like held over that were signed, and it's a good cause.
Mhm.
Liberty Defense Fund.
Mhm.
But I was excited because I've been reading this comic since issue 1. I'm a Hickman fan, so I kind of pick up things of his, and if it interests me, I'll keep going with it. And this was a really kind of interesting book. It Hickman is this really great way of world building. You know, he just is this. He builds the world, and he allows his artists to embellish the things that they enjoy, and to really kind of run wild with the story. And so I was really excited to read this, and going back and going through the second read, I just loved it even more. There were things that I found that when I first read this story, it was hard to follow along reading it issue by issue, but going back and taking it in this big chunk, it was a lot more fulfilling, and it felt like there's a bigger story, and right now we're kind of just dipping our foot into it. So I'm gonna shut up now, and let's go on. First, let's ask our guests, because we're polite here at the Bleed, unlike most of our bleeding cool coworkers.
Shut up.
I'm just kidding.
Everybody at Bleeding Cool is nice. Come on.
Yep, everyone.
Speak for
Really
yourself.
nice. But
Bastards.
I'm gonna ask. So let's see, Brandon. I know you seemed pretty interested to read this book when we talked about it. So why don't you tell me what you thought about it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You talk about Hickman, and Hickman's such a dominant kind of creative force. He does so much, and he's so idiosyncratic. But I mean, of course, and as a writer who works with a great artist, I mean this with all due respect to Hickman. I really love the art in East to West. I think Nick Dragotta is doing an unbelievable job. I was kind of a little bit familiar with Marvel thing he did with Joe Casey, and then and I know he's been floating around doing a lot of other stuff. But this was just a really great book art-wise, and I think he's given a lot of opportunities from Hickman, because Hickman's kind of, you talk about world building and it's just immersive. It's like the world is there, and then you're just you kind of flood it over with it, and some things don't quite make sense, but the tone is still there, and the plot he likes to unroll slowly, so all you really have is kind of the world that they're in. And so much of that's a visual element in comics, of course, but especially when you have this kind of slowly coalescing story that's coming from literally every direction, right? There needs to be like kind of a really strong visual, and to be able to do that with the only kind of parameters being kind of futuristic, kind of West is really tough. But but Dragotta keeps it interesting. All the designs are great. Some things are throwaways that he only uses for a panel, whether it's a robot or a monster or a setting. But it's always really interesting and always fits, and it's just really great stuff. So as much as it's like I said, Hickman and writers in general can often be very dominant, it's such a great book based on what Dragotta brings to it as well. So and a lot of that's the opportunities that Hickman gives him, but especially the first trade, which is kind of what we're talking about, as it's coming together, as Joe was saying, it really depends on it being visually interesting. Otherwise, you would just kind of maybe roll your eyes a little bit, but it really holds together. So, a big fan of the art.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. If you don't mind if I cut in for 1 second. Yeah, I think, honestly, Dragotta really carries this series. Hickman's amazing. He's one of my favorite modern comics writers. And just his approach to storytelling is really interesting. Like he sort of gives you these like little snapshots. It's like he'll sort of construct this world in his own head and all of the different pieces. It's almost like this big machine, made of gears. And like he gives you like little pieces of like the way that one gear turns over here, and then he'll cut away, and then like 2 months later he'll like cut to a different gear, and then maybe 6 months later go back to that first one that he showed you. But meanwhile, it's all sort of working really, really well together. But it's really hard to do that kind of a story, as you said, that's coming from all directions without an artist to really stand up or to prop that up. And it was interesting. I got a chance to talk to him a little bit, to Hickman, that is. about East of West. I did an interview with him for Bleeding Cool, and I kind of like assumed that that Hickman had sort of wrote the hell out of it for Dragotta to draw, but I guess like the approach that they're taking, it's like really open ended for the most part.
Yeah, he said it. He's really like they're into the Marvel style. I'm pretty sure that he just kind of writes bare bones scripts, and Nick just throws all of his ideas into it, and I think
which is amazing. He does such a good job with, like you said, Brandon. Like the design work alone is amazing, and the fact that he puts so much time and effort even to those little throwaway pieces is just mind blowing. And I got a chance to talk to Nick a little bit too at Comic-Con, and he seems like he's pretty fast too. I mean, like he said, he can generally get about a page a day, maybe a little more, depending on what's going on, which is insanely impressive. And if the book has been, hitting its schedule too, basically monthly since it started, which alone is just a massive feat, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And like take it from me and Amy on Rocket Girl, who's doing pencils and inks and colors and letters, and it's hard to even keep it bi-monthly, And I know they've done a few skip months. Are they doing these skip in between arc thing, or are they just kind of getting it out when they can get it out? But,
well, I think right now they're working ahead because they're doing this like an info book, kind of like one of those old Marvel Universe handbooks. I think they're doing something like that fleshes out everything. It kind of gives you like a database and the maps.
Yeah. But but like David was saying, that Dragotta's doing it. Even if it's 10 issues a year instead of 12, it's with the amount of work that he's putting into it, and being able to turn it out and keep it interesting is great. So it really is. It's a book to be admired on so many different levels.
Well, Anwar says that he's a huge fan of Hunter and his Krang-like eyeball. What else do you like?
Yes.
And that brings the lettering of that book, man. The lettering, especially the eyeball when it's talking, and everything is so in sync from Frank's colors. Frank Martin does the coloring, and Russ Wooten does the lettering, and it just seems so seamless. There's the part where Shaolin decapitates her father, and you hear thunk that's in the lettering, but like the way that the lettering is mixed in with her and the sword swipe, it's like she's slicing the lettering in half. It's like embedded in the artwork. It's just, there are these little touches that all of it is just, it's like a masterclass in storytelling. I think that Dragotta, I think he's received, I think the most unfair criticism that an artist can get is that, well, it all looks the same. Nick Dragotta is so great at expressions in people's faces and showing you not just that someone's angry or someone is afraid, but he shows you that timidness between, like when you're afraid but also insulted. Like he shows that split second on your face where you want to say something but you'd better bite your lip because death's about to shoot you in the face, and it's just so I really enjoyed the Nick Dragotta's his designs, his character work. I just think it's one of the best things he's done. I've never read Vengeance. I think that was the
that was it. That was the Marvel book.
But I read his issues of FF.
Yeah.
And those were some of my favorite. I mean, Johnny Storm living in an apartment with Peter Parker when he first returns from the dead, and
that was him.
Having the bedroom closet lead to the negative zone, and a nihilist chained to the toilet. It's just so perfect. And he nailed it. And to see him really cut loose on a book like this is just, I love creator-owned stuff, and I love when they just let the reins go and let these guys do what they want to do. And this book is really Nick Dragotta just unleashing.
Yeah, and even having worked as an editor and worked on a lot of different people when I was at DC, it's the nature of the beast. People call it corporate comics, and then they kind of associate a negative with it, and those problems are real sometimes. But it's still like and then there's the obviously, hey, this is my creation, so I really like it and I'm invested. But some of it is just like, certain people, especially very creative people. And again, it's not always, I don't know Nick Dragotta, but certainly a couple of people I worked with, including Amy, but others as well. It's like they really just need to not be told what to do. You know what I mean? And that's hard to it's hard to trust that if the person's not really established, even if you're working at Marvel or DC, because there's you say, because everyone wants it. Everyone says, oh, if only I work in the mailroom, but if you made me president of the company, I would show up on time every morning. That's why I'm always late. It's like, well, why don't you show up on time first, and then before you get all these things? But with the creative process, it really is draining. The more you collaborate, and even if you love your inker and you love your colorist, or you love the writer, or you love the character, and but DC is telling you have to do this, or Marvel's telling you have to do that. It can be exhausting. So it's like, and this book is fresh, and I like it better than his Marvel's stuff Dragotta did at Marvel. I think it's in a different style too, and like he gets to pull in any influence he wants. I looked at this first, the first issue, the first couple of pages with that explosion that they're kind of zooming in on, but it's also widening out while the explosion's getting bigger, and that's like straight from Akira. You know what I mean? And
yep.
It's like, there's so much Otomo in this, and then I've heard Dragotta talk about it a few times, and he mentioned some other manga, and I'm not as well versed maybe, but it's like, oh, this looks exactly like I said in a Otomo book. Sometimes shot for shot, some of the facial expressions, which is like fine, you know what I mean? I don't mean in a derivative sense. I just mean like, hey, you can bring in all these kind of influences, and what's cooler than Akira? You know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't you do that if you're doing a Fantastic Four book or a Batwoman or whatever? And sometimes it's just like, sometimes it's just like kind of the demands of being thrown into a system that's been going on for 50 years, And so, really Critter owned a chance to spread your wings, which, it looks like it's happening on East to West. And the best part is that the fans are supporting it, right? It's, it's doing well. So,
Hope they can keep going for as ever long as they want to do it.
Exactly.
It sounds like it is doing really well. Like Hickman was saying that he's able to pay, both, well, not that he's paying, but they're making enough money. They're making way more money than they ever made at Marvel for the artists, at least both the Nicks that he works with, Nick Batara and Nick Dragotta, which is insane and amazing, and it makes me so happy that that they're able to do this incredible work that's just straight out of their own mind, no control by anybody else, and they own the whole thing, and they're making a ton of money doing it, and that's great. That's ideal.
Well, Eric, what did you've been relatively quiet. This is your last episode. You need to speak up, man.
I'm drinking it in. I'm listening to what other people have to say. And I will throw a shout out to Anwar as a segue. He mentions in our little chat that he's talking about the monotone, the palette, the chromatic palette of the Horseman. And I wanted to kind of mention that. I think the coloring, it's been touched on, but the coloring is especially effective in this first volume. You get so much of the characters and the recognizability of the characters from the color scheme. And there's a lot of information communicated through the colorist in this series. So from an artistic point of view, I want to make sure that gets appreciated. And I also, I agree completely with Brandon, maybe even more so with Brandon, that this first volume, Nick Dragotta is the star here. I don't know that I would have had the same reading experience, or would have been just as enthusiastic to go on to the issues after this first volume if visually this hadn't been so dynamic. Because one of the challenges when you're reading a Jonathan Hickman story is that you need to read a lot of it in order to really start to see all the pieces. He writes very long form. So I read the first issue, and I enjoyed it, but I also thought it was hard to pin down. You didn't really get a strong sense of who's even going to be the main character of this story yet. But through the course of the first trade, obviously you pick that up. The plot is so dense. The characters are so kind of closed off to the readers initially. Like you have to experience them. When we had our preview podcast or hangout and we talked about New Avengers, one of the kind of the points that I made about that book was that I felt like in a vacuum, not having experience or exposure to the characters that he was featuring, he didn't give you a lot to work with, to relate to. But it sort of worked better because you'd been reading Marvel comic books for 50 years. East of West is an interesting riff on that, because he does the exact same thing with these characters, but there's no 50-year history. You just have to take it on faith that he's going to get there, and he does. But because that's such a big leap of faith, narratively and creatively, Dragotta does all of the heavy lifting. Like he helped pull me to the issues following the first trade, and those issues after the first trade are when I feel like everything starts to fall into place. I mean, even towards the end of the first trade, it starts to all fall into place. But if it hadn't been for that visual scheme, if it hadn't been for that style and those amazing designs, I don't think I would have gotten to where the story is firing on all cylinders. And it's a weird thing because I can't really criticize Hickman for it, because he's doing long-form storytelling in a way that I can't think of many other creators that are doing it with the same vision. I mean, there are certainly plenty of others, but he's doing it in like no, this is going to be 60 issues before you fully understand what this is all about. Like, you will not fully appreciate my first issue until you've read my 50th issue, and that's a hell of a set of confidence for the writer and the reader.
I think that's like, Hickman has earned that, and you're right. There aren't a lot of people who do that kind of work, that sort of really intricate long form story work. I mean, the only one that's like relatively similar that I can think of is like what Morrison was doing on Batman,
or even New X. Anything Morrison, like his long,
for his long stuff. Yeah,
what I get from Hickman too.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I hear frequently about Hickman's work, is like the character stuff. And we even, like you said before, we mentioned this when we were talking about New Avengers, and I see it in like some of the reviews and stuff. I personally don't have a problem with the way that like he deals with characters. Like, they are sort of closed off to the reader, and it isn't necessarily, they're not really essentially like relatable people, but I think like that's almost the point, that they aren't. Like, generally in a lot of Hickman's work, it's people dealing on like a very large scale, dealing with like really intense, high concept issues in a way that like they have to be sort of detached from like general human interactions in the way that like we would talk to each other, or the way that we might be used to sort of like a more like grounded character, I guess. But it works for the story. It works, especially with Death. It isn't exactly clear who he is, and he's not necessarily the most relatable person, but he's still a badass, and he's still. Hickman does a really good job of showing like intelligence in his characters, and showing like how this sort of like Rand's Shakespearean sort of his dialogue, and even in some of his narrations, shows the motivations of the characters through like almost like kind of, I said this before, but like kind of like a machine-like like strategy almost, that like you are learning about these characters based on the way that they're talking to people, and based on like their like the actions, and like the way that they're framing things. Like, for a good example of this is in the first volume of East of West, when like he's just about to start the fight with like the Chinese nation in what we would call California, and just like the dialogue between Mao, I can't remember the character's name, Mao's grandson, who is now in control of the empire, and his two daughters, one of which is,
I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And his two daughters, one of which is Death's wife, and like their interaction and like the way that they're talking, it's not really like relatable. Like, I can't necessarily say I know people who speak that way, but it makes sense for the story. It makes sense for the scale. It makes sense for like the gravitas and like just sort of the tone that he's going for the whole thing. And it's the same way in New Avengers. But then, like, because you can see in some of his other works that like he does do a really good job of grounded character work. Like, when you look at the Fantastic Four, if you guys have read that, the way he handled Johnny Torch and like the little kids in particular from the Future Foundation. like people say that he can't write good characters, but I disagree. I think he can, but it's like it shows a lot that he's making a decision to present these characters in this particular way.
I think you can get away with this kind of classical drama, big iconic characters in comic books. I mean, they've always kind of been around. That's what Superman is, but it always has been. It's everything that Kirby ever did, especially when Kirby got to do more and more of his own stuff, right? I mean, it's you can make the same things. And again, it's just like I said, and David's right. I mean, Hickman earned the audience that he has that'll wait for this stuff, because people said, no, if you're along for the ride, the payoff's going to be there, so I'm with it. But I think East and West works where you don't have the advantage. Like, you can look at Avengers, and at least all of us have been reading comics forever, so we kind of half get it, no matter how weird it is, because we know the characters. They don't need to be explained. I think when I first read, and this is going back, when I first read the East and West, the early stuff, I remember thinking, oh, those little kids are reincarnations of like the two what do they call them, witches, the Crow. I thought it was all the same characters, just in different time frames, and I mean, you that get remedied pretty quick. But like I said, it works because you do have those touchstones that are so dynamic, right, and understandable at the same time. But again, it's just this kind of immersive experience. It's like video games now, and I'm not a big video game player, but they have so much intricate storylines. But if you look at like Mario Brothers, right, on Nintendo, it's like all you're doing is going and jumping on turtles and eating hallucinogenic flowers, right, and everything else. But there was a world there, and it's the music, and it's the weird colors, and it's the you know what I mean? It's like, and I'm not saying Dragotta draws it like Mario Brothers, or that Hickman's writing like Mario Brothers, but it can work if you have this kind of this unified world. And Hickman might have it on a billion 3x5 index cards that all works out, but you could also have it just in your head. You know what I mean? If you can just kind of demonstrate it as a world that people can move around in and react to, and the characters can react to each other. You're right. I mean, that's great characterization, even if they are these kind of arch. It's not street level, but it's still it's all about the interactions. It's all about the history. It's all about the betrayals that you don't know about yet. You know what I mean? Just but it all feels real, and it's all there, and it's good stuff. If you like slice of life kind of autobiography, it's not that, but it's still great character work from Hickman and the art as well, obviously.
I wholeheartedly agree. I actually just had something to say in response, but I just slipped out of my mind. I got distracted by this little message that popped up.
Well, there's a lot behind. I think this first arc, when we were talking about it, I said it was very rewarding on the second reading, and we were originally thinking of maybe talking about reading the whole thing, and some of us have read a lot past this, and this is a book I think that gets better. And I remember reading it the first time. The only problem that I had with it is that after those first 5, because those first 5 are kind of about death and what exactly his goals are. And this is, Anwar even says right here, he says you never really feel the protagonist vibe from death. And then she just goes back to like what David said. You don't really know who the main character is. And it because you're familiar with storytelling and tropes and devices and things that people use to get these stories going, it feels right that Death would be the main character, and it feels like it feels natural that he is the main character in the story. But as you go on, it's like he's not, and Brandon's right. I mean, the whole world is the main character of this story. It is everything that is taking place within this world, and it's all having to do with not just death, but it's with all the people that it introduces in the first chapter. There's all the different leaders of their nations, and it's the people that are involved with this this cult that is trying to bring about the apocalypse. And but like I said originally, that was a criticism of mine, because it tells you, in this one issue, it goes back to the Endless Nation, and it talks about the native people that are there, and then it completely forgets about them, and then it goes to the New Republic of Texas and talks about the Rangers there. And so reading it at the time is kind of like, well, where is this going? What is going on? And then you look at it at the macro, and you see how it all feeds into each other. And this is something that Hickman has afforded himself because, I mean, he blew it out of the water with Secret Warriors. Even S.H.I.E.L.D. isn't finished, but that was still, really good. And then he adds on to that with Fantastic Four, and then with what he's doing with Avengers. And they're all lock stock with each other. They're all within this step. And it's like he's created his own mythology with this work for hire characters. And it's pretty amazing that he did that. And to see him start on the ground level, it's so great to see him build these characters in a way that they are so fully realized. But he, like you said, he might have these all on note cards pinned up to a wall, and it all ends up perfectly. But the way this book seems like the anti-Manhattan Projects. Mm-hmm. Manhattan Projects is a book where every single issue the concept changes and it just gets bigger and crazier and crazier and crazier. But it's not like it follows this logical narrative strand. It's just that it's just these crazy eccentric scientists just getting all this fucking crazy. Oh, what is Anwar saying? Does the Prince of New Orleans still have to throw beads at Mardi Gras? And see, he's one of the best characters. Give him his issue. He is one of the best characters, the Prince of the Kingdom of Africa, or the Kingdom of New Orleans.
That's the other thing that I love so much about it. Just like these bombastic ideas, like the way that like the United States is sort of like deconstructed and like sort of put back together in these different characters or different countries is just so well done. Like the endless nation of like the Native Americans, China taking over the West Coast, the Empire of New Orleans or whatever the name is. It's good. Like, and it's not really on the nose either. It's like none of these are. I mean, there might be a little bit of this in there as well, but it's not like direct and overt like social commentary. They're their own unique things that work for the world. It doesn't just feel ham-fisted at all, and they're just like sort of bombastically imaginative in a way that just really appeals to me in particular. And this then also goes back to Nick Dragotta, like his rendering and like the different styles. This is going a little bit beyond the first trade, so I won't get into it. But when you finally do meet the Endless Nation, the way that those are rendered versus sort of like the New Orleans characters and the New China or whatever it's called.
Everything feels different. They feel like every location. The Endless Nation is this crazy high tech, they're like the pinnacle, like it's like almost Wakanda, as far as that goes, easy comparison. Then you go to the White Tower and but it's like the Capitol. It's the
White Tower, and then there's the Black Tower too, which is in the south, I think.
Yeah,
right? The White Tower is in the north.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about the characters and the protagonists. I mean, there's nothing in there that really makes me in those first 5 issues that make me like Death. I mean, I've never been a big fan of like I'm the badass with the gun and you can't stop me. I've never been a big fan of those kinds of characters. But then they introduce
But again, keep in mind this is a Western. Like that's
exactly.
He's a cowboy, man. Like that's what he does. That's who he is.
But they slowly show you his plight. This is why
he's not the saint of killers, right? From Preacher,
exactly.
And when you see him the first time, you're like, oh my God, that's the saint of killers from Preacher. You know what I mean? But
he seems like a force of nature at first, but they slowly show you that he's anything but. He's a man that's in love, and he's a man that had a family that was ripped away from him. And how human is that?
But he's still a dick, Like he's not someone that like
that's what
I would want to have anything to do with.
He's not a guy I'm rooting for. If anything, the most devious guy is the guy that I'm rooting for, the Archibald. The secretary.
Oh yeah, just because he's a clever little snake, man. I like his characters.
Yeah, the English guy. I don't even know if they're supposed to be English, but I always see him. He's always in the English guy. Churchill, you know what I mean? Yeah.
He's very, very like.
Yeah, I mean he's written really well. His dialogue is great. The way that he like plays characters off is great. But it's almost like, there's no real necessary. I mean, I guess by default, Death is the protagonist because it's really sort of following his story and how everything else is sort of falling down around him. But it's almost like what intrigued me about this, and like this goes back to what you were saying about like not immediately getting drawn into the world, or like seeing why these characters matter, et cetera, et cetera. To me, it's almost like the world is like a character in the story, and like getting to know that world was just as intriguing to me as getting to know any of those characters. And that's something that like is really good about sci-fi in general, and it can also be sci-fi's greatest pitfall. And this ties to both of the creators' strengths, is that like they managed to build such a massive and like sort of absorbing world where you just want to know more about it without giving you too much information, with like giving you only the smallest little snippets of information that then hint at like a much larger sort of world beyond what you're getting. It's like packing so much into these little bits of description and exposition in a way that like just sort of speaks to this volume beyond like what you understand about the story. And that's what drew me in. Wasn't that like, oh, Death is a cool character, I want to find out what happens to Death. It's like, what is this world? What the hell is going on? You're getting all these snapshots.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think if you're looking at, a creator-owned project that's going to have some kind of market success, you're not first thinking, let's do this huge world-building thing that's got to run for 1 million issues before it makes sense, because it's kind of risky. You know what I mean? You don't really think of things that like in those terms. And it just occurs to me now that we're talking about it, and maybe this is what I'm about to say might just be a coincidence because it's a very small sampling. But if you look at the top creator-owned books, all of them at Image, Walking Dead, far and away, what a property it is. You know what I mean? As big as any of thing that Marvel and DC has. And some of that's luck, obviously. Not luck, but the good fortune of having, the TV series and everything else. And then a distant second, but still an incredible success, is Saga. You know what I mean? But, it's no Walking Dead, but what a huge success Saga is, like I said, for those creators. And I think a distant third, but again still successful, is East to West. I mean, East to West numbers are really solid, and that's just on the monthly books, and the trades are are obviously something that's has an even wider net and a more stable audience. And it's like, everything we're saying about East to West and this kind of world that it's in, you can say exactly about Saga, right? I mean, it's like, like you can pull it from anything, and they're going to go off on some weird tangent about the cat, or they're going to go off on a weird tangent about these characters that were just kind of throwaway reporters and all this different stuff, and it still works, and you still come back to the characters, and it's about, and that's supposed to be a space epic, obviously, and it is. Well, East to West, we're saying kind of is too, but Walking Dead is in its own way as well, because it's like anyone could die at any given point, anyone can kind of succumb to the pressures of that world and have a breakdown and have a huge character turn. It's interesting, and like I said, it just kind of occurs to me now that, like I said, certainly the top 3 established creator-owned books, and each in their own way, are not these very linear narratives. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, here's a protagonist, and here's what he wants. Like neither Kirkman and why am I blanking on the artist's name? Charlie Adlard. Or Fiona Staples and Brian K. Vaughan, or Hickman and Dragotta. Like, nobody went to the Robert McKee story seminar and took any notes at all.
Joseph Campbell's journey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's all Joseph Campbell, right? And none of it Hollywood script writing. Just interesting, So. Yeah.
It is actually. I never really noticed that until you just brought it up.
Like I said, and maybe someone will say, "Oh, but you're forgetting this book or that book," and I'm sure, like I said, it just popped into my head. But there are all these kind of madcap, Jim Starlin, Jack Kirby, bizarro journeys. You know what I mean? And even Walking Dead, which isn't a sci-fi, it really is that. It is about the world and these people moving through it and interacting and changing. So.
Well, is there anything about East of West that you think, fails? That like you think is a weakness to it?
Eric mentioned that the first 5. It's such a small sampling of what the overall story is about. And I think if there is any fair complaint, it is that you don't really know what you're getting with this story when you pick up this trade. It's awesome. I mean, it's so riveting and it's so engrossing and it just throws you in it. But I mean, it takes 5 issues, and it in the first one and the subsequent ones, it kind of shows you the conflict, the message, the breadth of it, the layout of this United States, this alternate version of North America that they live in. But you don't really understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the best parts and the worst parts. Anwar even just said the message is a very confusing part. It's just like this book of Revelations. It's like vague, predictions, Nostradamus-like predictions about the end of the world, and these people that believe in it, and these people that are very much trying hard to facilitate it. Mm-hmm. And as much as that's a criticism, I think there's two sides of that coin. For example, everyone has their opinions on Lost. Most of them are, when it was first on in the first few seasons, everyone loved that shit. And then it gets to the end, and it's like, oh, it wasn't what I wanted it to be. It was stupid. But with Lost was so, I mean, what I loved about it is that you were with those people on the island. You were in a plane, and you crashed with them, and you have no idea what's going on. You had no idea that you just crashed in the middle of this centuries-old conflict, and they didn't tell you what it was. They didn't hold your hand and guide you to what this conflict was right away. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying East of West is like Lost, but I'm saying East of West takes very similar storytelling, takes very similar liberties in that it throws you in the center of the conflict. Death has returned, and Death knows what he wants, but you don't know what he wants, and you don't know why he's back or where he was to begin with. And it's not holding your hand and telling you, there aren't dialogue boxes there's no prose box underneath each panel that says this is the Endless Nation. These are the people who are so technologically advanced, and one of their leaders helped form the message. It's very much a here it is, and dive right in, see what you can make of it.
Mm-hmm. I think on its own, like if I just read the first trade and I never read anything after it, I give it 1 rating. But every subsequent issue, it increases my opinion of the previous issues, which I think is, a commendable feat. To go to Brandon's point, it's interesting that the things that seem to captivate readers and the things that seem to kind of really hook people are really imaginative, open-ended, vivid worlds. In some cases, more.
Which works great in comics, right?
It does. In fact, I think it's the most effective. It seems to be the thing that seems to be the most effective or successful in comics. That seems to be where, in most cases, that's the sweet spot for comics. I mean, there are certainly comics that do a very different approach and focus very much on, on a more intimate story or a more grounded story or are very focused on, character work. But what seems to captivate readers, and what even captivates me, I mean, because when I picked up East of West, I was like, what sold me on it is Jonathan Hickman, crazy dystopian future Western. That's all I needed to hear. Mm-hmm. And then going through the first trade, the setting, I said, Nick Dragotta was the shining star, but in concert with that is the vividness of the setting. And the setting only takes you so far, though. The setting will only get you, 5, 6, 7 issues before you start to want more. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's where this trade is sort of challenging. Like you get the first trade, and if there'd never been a 6th issue after these first 5, I'd have been like, fuck this trade paperback. I would give it like a B. I mean, it's still really great craft, but I'd have been irritated. Like, I'd have been just like, yeah, bastards. But because I know at this point that it's going to be developed, and because the issues that follow it continue and can just continue to get better and better and better and make all the previous issues get better, I give it an A+. But I wouldn't give it that A+ without the following issues. So that's a weird criticism. which is like
yeah,
but it is.
It
I mean,
is.
It's
yeah.
a
I mean,
problem.
and it's tough to do because you can say the same thing about a lot of monthly books, even more that you read. Oh, it's only
Same deal.
yeah, and it's so hard to write a single issue that's a story in and of itself plus a larger. And I think some people have just given up. Honestly, I think Hickman on his Marvel work has given up on trying to write interesting single issue stories. And then it comes the collection, but you're doing it every 5 issues or whatever, and that's basically dictated by like the expectations of comic shops, which there aren't too many of, and kind of what bookstores understand. But really, 5-issue collected editions just become a big single issue, basically. You know what I mean? It's still because it's certainly not intended. And Rocket Girl's the same way. I mean, but certainly East to West. So I'm not trying to make any kind of criticism. East to West is not intended to be a standalone volume 1, a standalone collection of the first 5 issues. Oh, and if you like it, then you could pick up the next one. It is part of a whole, And yeah, as a consumer, it's like, well, yeah, you can get burned on that stuff. If the creative team never returns, you're going to hate them so much. You know what I mean? It's just, but there's no workaround really that anyone's figured out in comics, which is, comics evolves so much slower than everything else in the world. You know what I mean? From the technology of how people make them to these like things that it's a monthly book, even though there's not a monthly artist alive anymore. There are a few, obviously. But it really just doesn't work that way. And even if there are the very rare person who can do a book in a month, just pencils of the quality that people expect today, well, then Marvel's going to double ship your book. You know what I mean? For the first 3 months, you can't do it. You can't do it anyway. So it's like, it's just there's no workaround to it. So it's tough.
It's true.
And
the economics.
And maybe that's a big reason that numbers are sometimes struggling and dwindling. But but then again, every reader is the judge. It's not the market and it's not the publisher. It's like, well, you know what? If you like it enough that you're going to come back and buy the next issue, great. If you don't, then then you failed. No matter how much cooler it would have been if I read all 60. If you don't come back for number 6, in a way that's on on the people who make the book. It's like, oh, we didn't do our job to make it compelling. I mean, working on All-Star Superman, which only won every single award, and certainly didn't come out on time, but it got more and more popular after they did a collection of the first trade, which was I think 6 issues, something like that. The numbers really started to go down. It's like, oh, how could this just won the Eisners 2 years in a row? Everyone loves this book. Everyone's talking about it. It's now considered a few years later, All-Star Superman, one of the great Superman stories, if not one of just the great all-around stories. And we would talk to people in marketing and say, oh man, the numbers are going down on 10 and 11. You'd think people would be excited. They said, no, the trade came out, so they have that. Now they're just waiting for the second trade and it to be all wrapped up. And in a way, you can say, well, I don't blame them because the book is so goddamn slow, you know what I mean, in shipping. But in another way, as like a fan, it's like, man, it's like I wouldn't be able to wait. There's a lot of books I can't wait for. Saga 22 or 23 came out today, whatever it is. I can't wait for the trade on Saga. I got to pick up the book and read it. So it's a fine line, you know what I mean? And like I said, it's something everybody struggles with. And it's certainly, I'm not trying to place it on the fan, because at the end of the day, you've got to try to make a book that the fan can't wait for the trade, right? That's what kind of like the catchphrase you wish would catch on. But here it is that can you do a better book than Hickman and Dragotta are doing on East to West? No, it's great. You know what I mean? How can you not want that? But people say, oh, I'll wait for the trade, or I got the issue, it's in my to read. It's tough. So in a way, it's like, I mean, there's no answer, but it is something. The comics sometimes has these kind of phantom handicaps that, how do you beat it? Maybe you can't. I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't worry about it because it's just so ethereal.
But it's so interesting, and it's difficult. Like especially when you can compare it against like the comics market in France or even in Japan and Korea. Like they're obviously both very different, but in France, like they basically essentially only write for the trades, and like you get those big album editions. But they also have like such a different history too, and like the meaning of comics in that culture is much different than like the meaning of comics here. Like they don't have that kind of history of superheroes. They also don't really have that history of monthly. Like a lot of like their really like sort of important and historical comics things, or Asterix and stuff in France. Like those were either serialized. I think it was weekly. I don't know. It was before my time, but like
Well,
writing for like
newspapers,
the
you
album.
know, we had
Yeah,
newspapers with strips, and
Yeah.
it seemed like in Europe it was all anthologies that were coming out all the time, and with Japan it was I feel like Japan pioneered the way for graphic novels, you know, with doing all their mangas and big installments, thick installments, and coming out with those as frequently as they were, and how many different series. It's a little envious, and I think that our culture, I think the United States, North American comics culture is sort of meeting them there. We're still just so hung up on capes and spandex, and it's just so. It's so, and I wish we
it's in
would
the
get that.
DNA of comics over here. I mean, that's where
Yeah,
it
is.
started.
We enjoy it.
It's hard to
but
divorce it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through some quick Anwar thoughts because he's had some great gems in here, especially.
Yeah, sorry, Anwar. We've just been steamrolling.
He talked about it, and and he was saying he was talking about the horsemen, and we were going back to Dragotta's character design. He mentions that each of the horsemen, you know, that they're so fully. He didn't say this himself, but I mean, to me, they're fully developed and they're fully fleshed out. And they're very unique in the sense that they are these monochromatic palettes. You know, each one of them is a different color. They might be younger, they might be a different gender, but they are in essence who they are. And that's really interesting that it drops you in, like, here's their resurrection, and it shows you without really telling you what's going on. And he says that he really likes the whiny nature of war. You know, like that war was someone who was like, you know, a world destroyer and could strike fear into the heart of someone just by looking at them, and now is a little boy. And he misses that immaculate female body that he had. That's such a cool character, you know, this aspect. You're reborn in this prepubescent boy's body. You were this hot shit, you know, you were hot. People feared you, and you knew exactly what you were, and you have to like meet that again. Whereas Conquest, you can see his personality right away. Conquest, and that's what he said. You don't. I think it's something. I'm glad that Anwar picked up on it. He said Conquest seems like the most dangerous, and he's so right about it. I mean, even later on, you see that Conquest can take so many different forms, and you don't understand that. And you see him as this confident character. You see him as this character that understands the role that he's supposed to play and is playing it. And you know, he used to be a woman, and when she mentioned, you know, when War mentions I miss my old body with my curves, you know, Conquest is like, don't even go there, because Conquest was that woman, and he just doesn't want. He's so in control all the time. And it's such an interesting character because he is the embodiment of Conquest, and it goes into that later. I thought, and I really enjoy with Conquest is now, you know, he raised that child that ends up becoming the caretaker at Armistice, the caretaker at the center of the conflict where they call their peace. You don't really realize it the first trade, but you find out later that is Conquest's adopted son. And then, like, that is one of my favorite characters, this character that becomes the word, the message. And Anwar mentioned also that the message is kind of confusing because it doesn't really tell you what it is. And I think that's what we were talking about. It's subsequently in the issues that follow, it really gives you the meat and bones into what is driving this end of the world and this cult. But the message, they only give you bare bones of it, but they kind of go into it at the end. Yeah, there you go. They go into it at the end. Read right now. You have time. They go into it, you know, and they tell you that the message is this weird, vague poem almost. It is like this Machiavellian prediction that these people are trying to make true, and you don't really like understand the severity of it. They don't tell you the severity of it. They just tell you that the world's about to end, and I think that goes to one of the criticism with Hickman and his storytelling. And with New Avengers, this is the criticism that we had with New Avengers, is that they talk about the world ending and they talk about it being this very drastic thing, but they never really show you why. You know, that's
it's the end of the world. I mean, how are you going to show the world ending?
No, I hear you, but I mean, if you're talking about the world ending, I want to see it on the macro level, especially in a story like this. I want to see the people of the citizens of these kingdoms, where everyone, like, I want to see why, like, the world is in the process of ending and they're doing it. How is it affecting everyone? And I think that that's just kind of the same thing with New Avengers. Is that they tell you that they're killing planets, but you don't really have any. I don't want to see them whine over killing a planet, because they're not showing me this other planet, and I don't care about that other planet. I care about Marvel Universe 616, and I could care less if they destroy that planet as long as that planet exists, you know. So I think that's the same thing with this. Yeah. I'm practical.
I don't care if they kill that world as long as mine's here.
Out of sight, out of mind, man. Okay. You can kick that puppy under your desk as long as I don't hear it. Well, don't kick.
Well, again, and I said this before, and I'm gonna say it again, and you're right, and that's a valid criticism, and I hear that. But to me, it seems like with East of West, it's and I guess for New Avengers too, it's a book about, you know, both of them are sort of like the end of the world, which is an interesting sort of thing to see where Hickman's headspace is at. If he's got 2 books about the end of the world, but
he's out.
Yeah, nihilism plays a big role in a lot of his work right now. But it's a book about the process of the world ending rather than like the impact, if that makes sense.
I hear you.
And it speaks to his writing style, and you know, he uses a lot of terms, and this is the 3rd time I've said this too, but you know, like the machine, like the engine, and all this sort of stuff. And you know, his writing style is very similar to that too. You know, lots of gears happening, lots of these things, and it's detached, because like that's like the players in the end of the world would be detached. You know, you would be dealing with people like on such a high level of like intellect that they would not really have like these kind of normal social ties of like, you know, they're, I mean, maybe they're, I don't know, I'm just sort of, you know,
you catch glimpses of their humanity, you know. Glimpses.
Sure.
They don't really, but everyone's guarded, and I see that. I mean, every human being that breathes, they're not going to go out and tell you what their life's mission is. You know, they're not. I mean,
especially when you look at East of West, all the characters are like either royalty or like the embodiment of the apocalypse, are the 4 horsemen. Like these aren't normal people. Like they wouldn't be dealing with normal people.
Mm-hmm. The story isn't afraid to. I don't think the story is afraid to introduce to you a concept just to destroy it 1 second later. Mm-hmm. Anwar even mentions, he says that we're introduced to Mao's nation at the edge of the Golden Gate Bridge, and then the next scene is just this big fight scene where they're tear it apart and they kill all the leaders, and like what the daughter who's in exile is, now guess what, you're the leader. It's like they do this issue, like one panel set up, Great Wall, this bridge that leads across the Golden Gate Bridge that leads across to the nation of Mao. And they show you, you know, like, we have fought all our enemies. We've been here, you know. Mao the First found this land when he was exiled. Mao the Second, you know, built the wall. But Mao the Third is who fought all comers and made it great. And it's just wiped out. You know? Like,
yeah, but it's great.
Like,
I mean,
it's a hell dog, you know?
It's a hell of an impact, you know. Like you build up these great ideas, these big things, then all of a sudden it's like, boom, done, moving on.
And
you
see,
know,
that's why it shows
gravitas.
I don't think that Hickman's incapable of showing you the impact of people's actions and what it has on the people around them. But I mean, as far as being a story about the apocalypse, I mean, I shouldn't say that because he should narrow his focus, because I mean, this book is so wide focused, you can't narrow it down without sacrificing a lot of the amazing bits. But I mean, he does such a good job at showing you that this nation of Mao is this huge thing, and then wiping it out, and it's a big deal. I mean, I just like to see people dying in the streets. You know? Just show me the famine. Show me that it is.
I just want to see people dying on the streets.
I mean, I want snuff film. I want faces of death. You know?
I find myself wondering, you know, what Hickman has to leave on the cutting room floor. Mm-hmm. Like, what would happen if he could do he could chase every plot and every character and just sort of and have absolutely no limits to marketing or publishing.
Yeah. What if it took only 5 minutes to draw a page? Yeah.
Yeah.
If he didn't have those limits, I'm
Yeah.
confident that we would get some of the scenes that I think Joe and I both sort of feel every once in a while they're lacking. And I look back at it and I'm like, well, on an unlimited budget, on an unlimited timetable, yeah, please give me all of that. But this is the other spot where I'm sympathetic to what to his spot, because if I'm Jonathan Hickman's editor, perish the thought, but if he comes to me and he says I can do this many things in my 22 pages or 20 pages or whatever, however many it is on a monthly basis, and which ones do I keep? I find it really hard not to say keep the ones that they've included, because I suspect that what got cut had to have been, not superfluous, not at all superfluous, but slightly less critical to the overall narrative.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have so few pages in a single issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's, the action is the thing that goes, because, and comics is an action medium, so it's so, again, it could be so problematic. Because if you got, nowadays at Marvel and DC, you got 20 pages. Well, I have a 5-page fight scene, but all they're doing is fighting. So I really need to get something else done. Maybe I can knock it down to 3. And, it's a slippery slope, because, you can wind up with the, hey, we'll have a 4-page scene where all the superheroes are on a roof with their masks off talking about their girlfriends and boyfriends and everything. It's like, you see that pop up all the time in books, and it's like, man, I couldn't be more bored, than that kind of scene that comes in all the time. But obviously the writer, I don't mean to throw the writers under the bus. I don't think it's the artist who's coming up with that 4-page scene. Then I can't wait to draw everybody on the top of the roof talking, with their masks off. It's like. Yeah, it really is. The action is the first thing to go. So, we talk about, there's a lot of, in my mind, Akira and Otomo in East to West, but you have that battle scene where Death kills about 1 million people, and he does it in 3 pages, mostly off battle. Akira, you're going to have, here's our 40-page motorcycle scene. You can do it, And Rocket Girl, it's so funny because, we do 20 pages in Rocket Girl, and issue 3 is only 18, so we could go 22 pages in number 4. And that has the subway chase scene with her on a rocket. And it's like, yeah, I'm dying for 2 more pages of action in that book. And you look at, again, Akira, you look at some of that stuff where it's just like they just go with it, and it's like, here's 40 pages of them riding motorcycles and not even talking. You know what I mean? And it's great. I think Pope did a little bit of that in Batman Year 100. Again, like from Akira, where they had literally a motorcycle chase scene. And he devoted about, an eighth of that entire book to just a motorcycle scene. And if you could do it, it's great,
Yeah, it's true. It's hard.
Did any of you guys ever read Jeff Darrow's Shaolin Cowboy?
Yeah. The third issue.
Yeah, the third issue is just him surrounded by zombies.
Spinning.
It's double-page spread. 2 panels. And it's just him spinning this wand with 2 chainsaws on the ends, just cutting zombies in half. The whole issue, I kid you not, the whole issue is laid out, 2-page spreads, 2 panels taking up both pages, just him spinning around in a circle, chopping zombies in half. Just spinning in circle. And it's the whole issue. And it's fucking awesome.
Jeff Darrow is...
Jeff Darrow. It is his artwork, and that's what saved. That's what saved it. I think I feel kind of. I benefited from it because I waited. I didn't read that month to month. That's not a book that we were talking about. That you wait to read month to month. That's a book you let it stack up. Like, okay, I have 4 issues of this. I can read it all.
Yeah.
Because 1 issue is just all Shaolin Cowboy spinning in a circle, chopping zombies.
Yeah, like I said, I'm of 2 minds, because it is so cool that he did it. You know what I mean? And then you're sitting there and reading it, it's like, wow, it really is. He really did spend an entire issue.
I spent $3.99 on this comic.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. $3.99 on the comic, You know, and he didn't even have the dead zombies pile up. Like, where'd they go once they all got chopped? You know?
Yeah, right.
You know? So they
And
should
then he
be.
says namaste.
Now I said, well, if he was, if the last page was them pulling back, and he's on a stack of all these dead zombies. I said, oh, that was pretty funny. But it's like, no, he just kept spinning. So maybe he was running and spinning. I don't know. Maybe that was part of it.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Brandon, going back to Rocket Girl for a second, if it's an image book, I'm curious, why did you sacrifice the 2 pages to add them onto the second issue? Like,
just because I got to keep the schedule honest, or
Oh yeah.
or the book. Again, we didn't have to, but I felt, with as much time as it takes the artist to do it, Amy to do it, it's like, I've got no business adding pages when the agreement is, 20 pages, 5-issue arc, let's get it done. And, Amy would be the first one to say, no, if you need more pages, let's do it. But it's just trying, like I said, to keep to, almost to like what Eric was saying before, like, oh, yeah, it's a creator-owned book. I can add 2 pages here. Oh, add 4 pages. It's like, it becomes a slippery slope.
Yeah.
So it wasn't required. It's a good question. That's the old editor in me, because you would have to do that at DC. If you begged for 2 pages, you'd finally get them, but then it's okay, we'll just take 2 out the next time. You know what I mean? So that's a long answer to a short question, but just trying to keep it contained.
Yeah, no, I'm all about the inside baseball stuff. I love that I love that kind of stuff.
Well, Anwar has another point that we haven't gotten to, and he talks about how at the end of the first trade, that he was more interested in the plot of the remaining 3 horsemen and what exactly they were trying to do without death, and also about Archibald, the Secretary of State for the South, and how he's kind of playing all these different sides. You don't know who he's betraying or who he's working with, because he says what people want to hear, or for what he's working for. You're right, Anwar.
This is the Archibald, you said?
Yeah, Archibald. You don't know what exactly his motivations are. And he says,
like a great politician?
Yeah, just like all great politicians, I think he says, I think Death is a badass, and to see him with the witches laying waste to the armies of the nation of Mao is cool. But seeing a motherfucker trying to fool the bringers of the apocalypse, that's nuts. It's just he has such gravitas, he has such fortitude in the face of these forces of nature, these cosmic forces of nature that you really can't bargain with yourself, and he does. He gets away with it, and he doesn't lie. He doesn't cheat he doesn't really lie, but he says, would I be sitting here talking to you if I had this conversation with Death? I mean, come on. But he's not lying to you. He's not saying I didn't talk to him. He has such an eye for the character himself has such an eye for the long game. Yeah. And I think as much as that's what I was kind of going back to. I didn't feel like Death is a protagonist, and even Anwar saying he didn't feel like Death is a protagonist. I like Archibald the most out of all these characters because Anwar agreed, because he's the one that is actually weaving his way through these events, and he's likable in some ways.
He just doesn't want to die.
Yep, exactly.
But I'm sure that if they make a movie,
the last page, he's with Bell Solomon, and the leader of the Rangers of the great nation of Texas, or the Great Republic of Texas, and he's telling him there's Bell Solomon saying they're bringing about the apocalypse, and I don't want to do that, and he's like, come on, man, how. You know what I'm doing, and I'm a part of this. Why are you telling me this? It's just so interesting because he tells Death, I want to be here. He tells those guys, I'm not afraid of you. I've done what you guys do, but I am afraid of Death. And then he tells the guy who's working against the Chosen in the message, and he tells him, like, you're such an idiot, and you're going to end up being screwed for this. And I don't mind that you told me. I'm not going to rat you out, but you think I'm going to side with you, you're completely wrong.
Yeah.
So it just shows you that his motivations are so enigmatic, and it's what is he getting at? what is he getting at? It's
survival. I think he's just like at all costs his own survival, and playing everybody else against him, and he's damn good at it. Like watching him talk to other characters is almost like watching him play chess. Like he tells each one exactly what they want to hear, but at the same time establishes himself as not necessarily their ally, even though that like they sort of need him at the same time.
But is it survival? I mean, he's at the area where they're breeding the beast. Mm-hmm. He's watching the beast go through his ritualistic training anytime he can. I mean, what does he call it? The zoo. He's the one that says that he goes there any chance that he can, and it's just so like.
But then a character like that, why would he be there all the time? Probably to learn.
Well, why if he was trying to survive? Why is he hanging out with the architect of everyone's demise? Not the architect, but
because maybe he can influence. Maybe he can influence.
Yeah, you think the child of such profound love is going to really be the downfall of the world? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. Okay, so we've been doing this for an hour. I think we've gotten out of it. Anwar, why don't you start writing your final thoughts right now, hopefully with a fun little sketch, and we'll work down the line. Eric, final thoughts?
I've said this before talking about Hickman, but don't take the first 5 issues in a vacuum. I mean, I've said it throughout this. Everything after this first trade is really good, which is not to say the first trade isn't also good. It's just that it just starts to build. The interesting character beats start to really add up. The interesting plot wrinkles really start to play out. So it's a great book, and the second volume just makes it better. So I would actually recommend, if you're going to start reading East of West, just get the first 2 volumes. Mm-hmm. Just get the first 10 issues, or and start there. Don't necessarily put your toe in the water to see if the water's fine. Just go for it. You gotta double down on this to really get the full effect.
Mm-hmm. And David, how about you?
It's my favorite series that's coming out right now. It's the top of my pull list every single week that it comes out, or every month that it comes out.
After Rocket Girl, right?
Of course.
Yeah,
hey man, it's on my pull list right now. Issue 6. And it's great. I mean, I don't think of it like, to me it's sort of weird to even define this as like that's sort of the problem with picking like a first volume of something, is that like this isn't a graphic novel. This is like one in a long series of a much larger set. It's a serialized novel, really, is what it is. And you gotta. I recommend going along for the ride. I agree with Eric. Get the first 2 trades. The third one will be out soon, I think, maybe in a month, because it's absolutely worth it. I mean, it's just probably the best sci-fi. Arguably, there's Saga and Rocket Girl, of course.
Rocket Girl's hardly sci-fi.
It's a damn good read. So.
No, I mean that seriously. It's not this kind of sci-fi anyway, right? It's got some jetpacks and stuff, but
there are flying cars in Rocket Girl. There's a girl in a jetpack in the 80s.
Yes,
that counts.
Time travel.
Yeah, the time travel is about it. Yeah.
Okay, so Brandon, what did you think?
Well, yeah, like as everyone's saying, it's like to pick it up. Literally think about picking it up and what that means to support a great book. If it sounds good because you're listening to it now, if you like it, I mean, these things are priced at $9.99 Image first volumes, right? Mm-hmm. As much as Eric's saying, it's you got to stick around with it. The second volume is probably only $14.99, right? It's like. Mm-hmm. These are books.
$14.99.
Yeah, exactly. So spend the $10. You're gonna like it. You're gonna want to go right back to the store and get the second one anyway, because it's the cliffhanger works well enough. Mm-hmm. Again, see what Dragotta is doing to make this world realize, and spend the $10 because it's gonna be on your shelf for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. That's something you're gonna like and go back to. So like again, just take advantage and support the book, because even though East of West is one of the stronger sellers, create our own stuff, so make sure, like you go out there and pay your $10, not because it's charitable, because you're going to get, such a tremendous reward I mean, five of us have been talking about it for an hour. Four of us have been talking in one writing for an hour, and it's great. And I'm sure, except there's, it makes us all excited about doing the book. So just, I mean, simply that, go out and support it. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because you will be rewarded. It's a lot better than having $10 in your pocket, having this book on your shelf. So that's what I think.
Great.
Yeah, Image is killing it. Anwar, so you've had time to write your thoughts down.
Nice.
Oh. This is Archibald. Or Joseph can be, if we grab that mustache.
Yeah, pull that off.
Just for men, Gel has like a touch of gray mustache. You can, just a touch of it. So yeah, this was. I really like Hickman, and I know one of the few people who have commented on our posts on Bleeding Cool in the forums, damn you forums, said no more Hickman. I'm sorry, we won't read Hickman for a little bit now. But everyone here is a big fan of Hickman, so don't be surprised if we talk about him again. And we're all, I am so thankful for Eric helping us out so much like he has. Eric has really kind of been the technical guru of figuring out the logistics behind getting everything ready and getting the video encoded, getting the podcast ready, and he also graciously hosted some of our stuff for a little bit on his own website. And so I really want to say thank you to Eric, and you have a guest spot whenever you want it.
Hell yeah.
Let me know, guys. Send me your schedule.
Yeah, definitely.
You know our schedule.
You know our schedule. We're about to delete Forever Evil off of there, but
yeah, I want
other
that
than
surprise.
Yeah, no.
We'll keep that. And then David and I will continue doing this, and we'll have next week. We're going to be joined by James Asmus and Omar Spahi. James Asmus is the writer of The Delinquents and Quantum and Woody, and Omar Spahi is the CEO and writer of a few of OSSM comics like Monomyth and Thaniel. And so it'll be interesting to have a publisher. Anwar is going to buy a microphone and some shrooms. Otherwise, next week.
I want to be on that one. Let me know.
Otherwise, we'll probably see him on my couch for one of our future episodes, and we can bullshit with each other. And hopefully he doesn't bring the mushrooms then, because I have a son that I need to look after. Again, so next week we'll be reading Atomic Robo, which is my pick and one of my favorite comedy series coming out right now. If you haven't read Atomic Robo, please make sure you do. #TheBleedBC to join in with us. This week, again, we were joined by Brandon Montclare of this awesome comic, Rocket Girl.
Thank you.
Rocket Girl.
Yes, that's the fancy San Diego hardcover. You got all the fancy editions, Joe.
Oh, dude. Well, I like hardcovers. I have this cool bookshelf, and I have my middle shelf is all Image comics, and it's all mostly hardcovers. And when I saw you guys were doing this for Comic-Con, I was like, oh yeah, gotta get that.
Yeah.
Gotta get that. It's so pretty. It's such a good packaging.
Yeah, that's great.
Amy does such a good job with this whole aspect of the story, the layouts, the artwork. She does everything, and it's great. She does everything that Brandon doesn't do, which is right. And
yeah, I mean, no, she really does. So yeah.
And Brandon has put together a really cool story. And in case you didn't know, he put this together all because randomly those two words came to his head. Rocket Girl.
Yeah, right.
They were talking to him about what they were going to do together.
Yeah.
Said Rocket Girl, and here's this awesome comic that came from it.
Yeah, usually that doesn't work, but it worked for this one.
Yeah, what can you tell us a little bit about Rocket Girl and give you a chance to pitch with the stuff that you're working on before we do that?
Yeah. I mean, Rocket Girl's it. The first trade's out now. The second arc is going to be starting up soon. But yeah, if you haven't read it, it's the quick. Well, I'm never too quick, but it's about a teenage cop from the future goes back to the 80s New York to kind of investigate these crimes against time. And the bit of the twist is that the future she's from is an alternate version of 2013. So I think I mentioned it, before, but it's kind of the vision of what 2013 was supposed to be if you were in an 80s sci-fi movie, right? Like by 2013, it is the time of Akira and Blade Runner and Back to the Future and all those things. So kind of what happened and why don't we live in the world with laser guns and flying cops and all this other stuff? So that's that. And like I said, the first trade's out, and yeah, Amy Reeder is a unbelievable force of nature, and I'm just kind of along for the ride. And also, Amy and I, for people listening to podcasts, we do a podcast every week. Summer it's been a little bit slow, but we're gearing up again now that September's rolling around. But that's at podcornpodcast.com. And we, usually do a little something every week, and it's all over the map what we do, but you can tune in there as well.
Podcorn.
I had no idea. Hell yeah.
Podcorn's funny. Didn't you guys just eat steaks?
Yeah. We had a live. Amy lost a bet. Amy lost a bet and had to buy me a steak, and I think there was some kind of half-baked plan that if we podcasted from the steakhouse, that it would be you could write it off or something. Not it would be the excuse for going. But yeah. So that one was
amazing.
Yeah. So you can hear the meat being sawed and the knife hitting the plates and stuff like that. It's pretty good audio. Yeah.
Well, do you have any other projects coming up besides Rocket Girl?
That's it for now, Rocket Girl. Some more stuff to be announced when the time is right. But like I said, the gearing up for the new arc of Rocket Girl, that's super important. So I'm going to be rolling that out soon.
When is the next issue out?
It's September 17th, but it looks like we're going to have to reschedule it slightly. It's in a couple of weeks, but that announcement will be coming out soon. It'll make sense when we make it, I think. So soon. It'll be in the fall. And we're going to be at New York Comic Con in a big way with lots of stuff also. So.
Nice. David's trying to do his interview right now.
Don't worry.
David. No more.
And for those of us who for those of the listeners who are interested in the books that you edited, tell us a little bit about which books we can find you on as editor.
Yeah, it's funny because I got to work on a lot of great stuff. I worked for Bob Schreck for a long time. I was about 4 years at DC. Almost all of it worked for Bob Schreck. What little I didn't work for Bob was under Karen Berger, so I got to do a lot of great stuff. I worked on All-Star Batman and All-Star Superman, Batman Year 100, Day Tripper, Sweet Tooth I was the first editor on, classic, kind of ongoing stuff like Hellblazer and Batman for a little bit, and stuff like that. Some personal favorites are, you guys ever read Cliff Chang and Brian Azzarello's Dr. 13? That was a good one, a fun one to work on. Haunted Tank for Vertigo, which was a lot of fun. So kind of all over the map, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some great stuff. But
and you met Amy from doing Madame Xanadu.
Madame Xanadu, yeah, exactly. I knew Amy actually from Tokyo Pop, so I didn't know her personally. I knew her personally to an extent. When I was leaving Tokyo Pop, she was getting some work there, and I worked at Submissions in Tokyo Pop, and so I always wanted to work with her. And Felipe Smith, who's writing Ghost Rider now, that's worth picking up. Felipe usually draws his own stuff, but those are the two people I always wanted to work with. Got to work with Amy on Madame Xanadu. So yeah, did a lot of Matt Wagner stuff at DC. There's Batman, Mad Monk and Monster Man and stuff like that. So just a ton of great stuff to work on. Again, most of it was because I was lucky enough to be working for Bob Schreck. So.
Are you still doing any editing stuff?
Books.
No, not now. I've done a little bit of freelance editing. A book just came out that I worked on, but I was done on it a year ago now. But Reading with Pictures, it was a Kickstarter. It's totally an educational book, which really wouldn't be my interest, like for little kids, But it's nice because when I worked at DC and Vertigo, I worked on these great books, and you get to work with Frank Miller, you get to work with Grant Morrison, you get to become friends with Frank Whiteley. You know what I mean? It's all great stuff. But the drawback is you can't really work with new young talent too much. Like Amy was one of the exceptions, right? And then she, and then pretty soon she wasn't new young talent. She was so talented. But so this Reading with Pictures book was a Kickstarter, and I got to work with a lot of young creators and a couple of established ones. So it was a lot of fun.
Cool.
That's awesome.
All right, Anwar. For those of you that live in the Phoenix area, Anwar is going to be doing a show on Friday, I believe, at the Firehouse. Isn't that right, Anwar? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Or just type in the chat box, yes. Yeah, that works too. Yes, he is. And he's always doing stand-up. He's Sunday at Stand-Up Scottsdale. He usually does dates at Monkey Pants in Tempe, which is a really cool bar. except for the inhumane goldfish racing that they do. But other than that, yeah, you can find Anwar pretty much at a lot of different places. He's always doing stand-up, and I'm excited to go see him for the first time. And that'll be fun. And we're going to have him back on soon. We'll have Brandon on soon as well.
Yeah, let's like I said, when you got a good book, let me know. So
absolutely.
I can keep talking. So
there you go. So you can find Brandon at podcornpodcast.com.
Yeah, and just BrandonMontclare.com goes to my Tumblr. So
BrandonMontclare.com to his Tumblr. Anwar, you can friend him on Facebook, facebook.com/AnwarIsDumb. As it sounds, spelled exactly as it sounds, has all his stand-up dates on there, and also links to YouTube comedy and stuff, and an ice bucket challenge or two. So from there, I think that'll do it for now. It was a great time. As always, I love talking comics, and I love talking comics with my friends, and I love talking comics with people that are really, really just awesome people, interesting, and also great creators, because you learn a little bit about them. And so, Anwar, even though you were vocally challenged this week, you did. Thank you for joining us. And Brandon, always great to speak with you. Cool. It's always fun. So thank you guys for coming on. Again, we'll be on next week talking Atomic Robo, James Asmus, and Omar Spahi. Bye, Eric. It was great having you.
See you guys.
See ya.
So thank you for joining us to The Bleed. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We'll see you guys next time.
Cool. Thanks, guys.